All right, so it's been quite some time since, well, I guess it would have been Dave Meyer who last spoke about route views to Nanog, so we figured that an update was in... Better? We figured that an update was in order. So here we go. Give you an overview of the route views project, its purpose, the status of things that we've added recently and that we're working on, and some of the issues that have come up, and perhaps solicit for some help from the community. The slides are on our website here if anybody cares to follow along. I apologize because MGP cut off a few of the bottom parts of the slides, but they're mostly readable. So route views started around 1995, started by Dave Meyer. Its original purpose was to give operators an opportunity to see their routes as seen by, say, UUNet, Genuity, or BBN at the time. And so you could answer your own questions about how the world saw your routes, as opposed to having to call the knock of your provider or your friend down the street or whatever. So you can do the debugging on your own without any help. And many see this is sort of redundant with the looking glasses that are, well, numerous at this point, I guess. But at the time, they did not exist. And we started off with a view that was provided by Randy Bush. Well, first from May West and then from May East and so on. And others started to contribute, which, well, makes it a whole lot more usable if you can see your view from multiple different providers. Today we have on the order of 70 peers on our Cisco, which you can tell that to. It's route views, route-views.routeviews.org, and you can look at your routes or anybody else's. There are complete tables, again from around 70 peers. And for those that are actually sending us multicast or MBGP routes, they're available there as well. So given all this data, the uses of that expanded greatly, from just the operators community to folks doing research, folks doing reports such as the CITR report, and later on to folks actually doing research on the behavior of BGP and issues that need to be corrected and how we might do so. Things like a lot of the projects that CADA has produced, Skitter is an example, actually uses a good portion of the data from route views. And let me see, NLANer is another one. I actually don't recall what the NLANer stands for. Do you, by any chance? Thank you.
Do you want to repeat it? Because I bet nobody heard it.
National, again?
National Laboratory for Advanced Network Research.
National Laboratory for Advanced Network Research.
Sounds
That's
good.
what I thought. All right.
Applied.
Applied research. All right. Good enough. So what we have is the CLI access, again via Telnet on the Cisco, and that's taking approximately 5,000 connections a day. It does vary, and when there are significant events such as the release of these worms that have occurred in the past couple of months, that jumps significantly. So obviously operators are making use of it as a debugging tool. And since then, in order to make it more useful for the folks doing research, I think this began around '97 or so, and it was first the NLANer folks that started collecting it, and that data was also at least transferred to the PCH, or transferred by the PCH folks to their own archive box. But they were collecting just the show IP BGP output. All right, I suppose I need to go a little bit faster here. In addition to the Cisco and the show IP BG format, which everybody knows is a pain to do screen scraping, so we have Zebra collectors, and they dump the MRT binary files. We collect RIBs on a regular basis every 2 hours, and then updates consistently. So as they occur, the files are rotated on a 15-minute basis. We also have a couple of other services, including a beacon, and all this does is advertise, wait an hour, and withdraw the route, and then repeat that cycle, which the research folk are using to follow timing, for example, or how such events ripple through the internet. So at a remote collection point, you might be able to determine that, well, it took 10 minutes, for example, as opposed to 30 seconds to actually propagate that event. We have a collection of papers, or a big bibliography of things that have been based upon our data, as well as some other things that are past presentations about route views. And if you look at our website, www.routeviews.org, that's misspelled, there's a list of the things that we have. As you can see here, we have a number of route servers, all of which are accessible via Telnet, and they currently consist of 3 Zebra servers, Juniper, and a Cisco. And let's see, a couple of mailing lists that are available for questions and information about route views. And the new stuff, we've placed a route views collector at the WIDE or NSP exchange in Japan, and one that is on its way to PAX very shortly. These are hosted by KDDI and ISC, to which we owe great thanks. So if anybody, this is my plug, if anybody would like to peer with us locally at PAX or at the WIDE exchange, please contact us. The main interest here is to eliminate the multi-hop sessions that we have on the servers located at the University of Oregon. We also have some DNS zones that convert RIBs collected by the route views collector and present those as 2 DNS zones that you can search. And things that we're working on is some data mining utilities, ways to collect data out, or to extract data out of what we have in a more timely fashion, and perhaps even automated. Let's see. And this is an example of the AS path or AS zones that we have. As you can see, Dave wrote these for me. It returns a text record for the reverse of a prefix. This happens to be the University of Oregon prefix 128.223/16, and it returns in the answer section here the record, and it returns the AS, the origin AS, the prefix, and the length of that prefix. And there is a similar zone, AS path, instead of ASN, that returns the full AS path. So it'd be whatever, 3582. Let's see. So issues that we've come up with or have been faced with are basically scalability issues with Zebra, and questions about the effectiveness of the timers that are used to timestamp records in the MRT files. This is the binary files. And a number of people have also come up with these same issues. There are a couple of other projects doing the same thing or similar things, and some of these folks have actually made progress already on correcting some of these problems. Let's see. And these are a few of the other projects that have been collecting BGP routing data. Ripe Briss, which has been very effective and has a very large accumulation of data, though I think we probably have at least a data set that goes back further, some thanks to PCH, who provided us with the older information. Let me see. And there are looking glasses available, which everybody knows about. I think that's it, just about. Right. So I kind of skipped over that, but is one of the things that I think perhaps we missed yesterday in the rancid discussion, and also applies to route views, is a lot of the folks in the community, some of you seated here, have helped us greatly, providing views, providing information about hardware, and these sorts of things, and we owe you a thanks for that. So thank you. Any questions? Of course Dave's going to hassle me.
That's good.
Kathy said I had to. I'm Dave Meyer. Actually, the last slide there, what I was wanting to get some sense of the folks in this room about it, two things. One is that the data collection aspect of the Route Views project has become kind of much more important even for operational purposes, because a lot of the operators are actually analyzing that data themselves now. So there's a research component to having that data around, but there's also an operational component, which is yet another thing I didn't expect to have happened. But my question really for the group, if people would like to comment on that, is whether or not it would be useful to try to do some kind of coordination effort over all these sources of data that are starting to be housed in various different places. It seems to me that we could do a better job of not only collecting it for archival storage, because it seems to be becoming more valuable with age, at least some of it, depending on the events of the day. And then it's just becoming quite a bit of data. So if anybody has any thoughts about that one, please contact us. The other thing I wanted to ask folks is, there are a lot of BGP listeners out there, but they're mostly based on either Cisco's or whatever, Junipers or whatever they are. But the collection aspect of this really doesn't need that overhead or that heavy weight. And what we were thinking about doing is building sort of a standardized listener that output this data in a standardized format so we could compare it around. And that's another thing I'd like to get people to comment on if they have any thoughts about that. Thanks.
Randy Bush, IJ. It's really nice to hear that something's getting better with age, Dave. I use it both as a researcher and operationally. I'm not really that interested in compatibility between the different ones. We take the data, we process the data into our own formats, we archive it in our own formats, we analyze it with our own tools, etc. But we may be more sophisticated as researchers. As operators, you just go slurp the data and look at it however you want. My concerns are far more with the accuracy of the data collection than the presentation. And I'm specifically concerned with, I really don't like EGP multi-hop, because that relies on the TCP stack of the collecting device and the delicacy of TCP connections over long distances. So you get reports like the notorious one, code red by supposed researchers, where 15% of the data that they demonstrated was actually useful, so on and so forth. So getting the collectors at the peering points, getting hard connections, getting uniform data, i.e. not customer routes from provider A, peer routes from provider B, and God knows what from provider C. Getting the data marked would be just wonderful. In other words, your peering connection with provider X, it would be really nice if it had a community telling you either this is their route, they got it from a peer, they got it from a customer, et cetera, would be just delicious. Really would. So it's the accuracy and detail of the data, having formats fooey. We know how to program computers.
Right. Well, let me say that getting rid of the eBGP or the multi-hop sessions is one of the objectives of placing these machines at PAX and wide, for example. Getting people to peer with us or even to change peerings once they're in place is, shall we say, more than difficult. A lot of people tend to be unresponsive or...
Give me a list of who to beat up here.
I'll send that to you in private mail. But if people can help us do these things, get peering, especially at these new sites, help us with getting co-location at, say, for example, a site on the East Coast, one in Europe, someplace, links, for example. This would help us along this road greatly to get the data that folks like Randy actually need to do their research. And that includes, if they ask you for the information, please help them. It's in your best interest.
Okay, we're running really late, so Woody, and then we're going to have to move on.
Well, obviously, being a proponent of all this, since I do it, I just encourage people to think about how necessary it is to have a third or fourth one of these at PAX and a third or fourth one of these at links, as opposed to putting them into exchanges that aren't yet covered. So I'd like to get people to think about that when deploying these sorts of things, rather than just saying, oh, where do I most want to have a box? Because it's the same place that everyone else most wants to have a box.
It's not just that, though, but you might want to cover some of these smaller naps, but there are particular naps that are of greater interest, shall we say, because of the people that are there.
Right, but the thing is, those have already had 2 or 3 boxes doing exactly this for years at this point, right? So having a third or fourth one in the same location that now has to be supported by the exchange operator, has to, get everybody peering with it all over again, isn't adding any value, whereas like Hong Kong, right, there isn't one in Hong Kong right now. There never has been. That needs to be covered, right? The exchange operator is happy to have one, has space dedicated, waiting for somebody to deploy there. Nobody's had money to deploy there yet, right? I don't know. I mean, I could probably name a dozen other reasonable sized ones that aren't covered. Milan, right? None in Milan. There are a lot of other big ones.
I'm sure there are other possibilities. Our budget seems to be actually a bit confined as well. So while we try to accommodate the places that the research folk have actually asked us to appear. So being, I guess, our primary customers, we need to accommodate that first, I believe. But I understand, yes.
How is it that you feel that those are not already accommodated by the 3 or 4 boxes that are already doing exactly what you're doing at that location and have been for years? That's my question.
They have made that choice for us by asking us.
You guys are going to have to take this offline because, Dave's up next and he needs some time. Oh, does Hank have a quick comment while Dave's setting up?
Yeah, I just hang out on RIPE-NCC. The RIPE-NCC, in response to Bill, will install a route collector in Milan shortly. In fact, the machine is already there, so you just have to switch it on.